can't get rid of that. 1 second. I'm sorry, everybody.
And just for everybody watching the recording, if we don't clip this, which we probably won't, Jace did say a prayer. I just didn't hit the button. So, we don't need to repeat it again.
Okay. You want me to pray again? Yeah, I want to.
Oh dear.
I wish I could figure out how to get rid of that. Oh well. I was smarter. Well, we'll just not worry about it. Okay, so let's back up. This is week 2. We are talking about politics. So we started last week by defining what politics was, and it comes from that word polis, right, which just means city. And we're talking about specifically when we deal with politics, it's how do we organize, how do we do community together? That's kind of what the question is. And so I asked, based on that, is the Bible political? Is it a political book? And I feel like everybody said, yeah, kind of. Certainly with that definition, but that's not the definition that we normally think of politics. We think voting, we think the state, all that stuff, but it's not necessarily the state, right? It's any kind of relationships within a community. And we are talking about something generally bigger, and that's what we want to talk about here, this larger thing. We're not talking about the family setting, although there is politics in a family, right? You don't want to say the wrong thing at Thanksgiving dinner to whoever was talking to, Uncle Fred, who happened to show up and thinks things very differently than you. It's all going to be that political game. But we're talking about, how the state should function and how we should function within the state or within the city, within that larger community kind of thing. So I've been reading a bunch of things. I know some of you have been reading some things because you've been telling me about it. So hopefully we'll get to some of those things. But is the Bible political? And the answer was absolutely, right? It's all about how relationships develop throughout. It's all about Israel and their relationship with God. It's all about Jesus and our relationship with him and how that's supposed to change reality, the world that we actually live in. And I think I said primarily the number one thing that is the Bible political was that statement that I'm going to bring up every single week, even though you're going to get bored of hearing it. I hope you never actually get bored of hearing it. Jesus is Lord is the most political statement that you can give. And for Christians, when they read scripture, that's cover to cover, right? Jesus is Lord is all the way in there. And I don't want to try and flatten the Bible. I just mean as Christians, we read through a New Testament grid back into the Old Testament, and we see things in certain ways that not everybody reading the Bible might see. So, but we also do things every week in church, if you're a churchgoer here, that are political. And I don't mean pledge allegiance to the flag, although some of you might do those kinds of things. I mean things like singing songs and telling stories of the faith. Those are political things. Okay? They're not about America or Russia or North Korea. They're about Israel and about a kingdom, but a kingdom that is ruled. And so we're going to deal with that question of what rulership means today. That's going to be really significant, that word radah, okay, in the Hebrew. So we're going to get there. All right. Then we ask this really quickly just to throw it in there because it's going to show up in a lot of our stuff, because this is what we think of when we think of politics today. What is Christian nationalism? Right. And you notice I put a small c and a big N because I have some reservations about Christian nationalism. It's okay for you to be a nationalist if you want to love your country, or you want to be a patriot, or you want to do that. But to say you're a Christian nationalist is draping the cross with the flag. It's connecting it in some way that you can't see that there's a real distinction between those things, between Christianity and nationalism. And that's my big concern. I think I defined it. I had a pretty decent definition. The belief that a nation's identity and destiny are explicitly tied to Christianity, and that civil government should privilege Christianity above other religions and worldviews. Okay, now you're welcome to think that these are just ways. I just trying to get some definitions on the table there. That we need to privilege Christianity above other things. We talked about a whole bunch of verses that kind of moved us in this direction and then away from this direction. It all depends on how you read Scripture. Right? And so that's why we're going to spend all of our time reading Scripture. We're going to be going through these texts and making some determinations on that, which brings me down here to this photo mosaic. Just to remind you, we talked about this. This is Rhodes' new book, just came out last month, and he uses his whole book is kind of outlined as a photo mosaic. The tiny little pictures that show up as one big picture. If you look really closely, you can see all these tiny little pictures of the same thing or different colors, but it shows up and it makes a face of Yoda or something like that. So all of these verses, all these texts coming together is what will give us an answer, at least in the ideal world. Okay. But the Bible doesn't exactly work like that. I think Rhodes might think it really does, which is concerning to me, that if we just take all of the verses that we're going to get some sort of answer. Okay. But we're probably not. What we're going to get is a lot of people's wisdom in a particular context at their time. That's how they understood it to be. And we need to say, okay, in our setting, what is the most similar to that? And does that still work today? Those are questions of wisdom. So yes, exegesis, but not only there. And we're going to do that. That's what we're going to be getting to, that photo mosaic. All right. And then we spent a little bit of time talking about Niebuhr's 5 different ways of understanding how Christ interrelates to culture, against culture, of culture, above culture, and paradox with culture, and transforming culture. Okay. And all of these have pieces of truth in them, right? Sometimes Christ is against the culture. He stands against it. This might be more of an Amish, like get out of this. Sometimes he's saying transform it. Sometimes there's the 2 cities approach. All the different stuff we said, I'm not going to go into it too much right now. But we dealt with that. And then we talked about an outpost. And that's how we ended it, I think, last week. This is the idea that the church is a kingdom. The church is a kingdom colony in hostile territory. Okay, we don't ever want to equate church and kingdom. Those are not the same thing. But hopefully the church is part of the kingdom. That's the idea, anyway, that we're part of this larger kingdom. And we're a kingdom outpost. So the kingdom is gigantic, and the church is an outpost within a larger community, within a larger hostile territory. An advanced outpost of the reign of God, planted in the middle of a world that hasn't recognized that reign yet, that Jesus is Lord. So they don't know it, so we're an outpost. So then the question is, we as an outpost, what do we do in order to show other people the reign of God? Do we take over, right? That might be one way. By sword, we just go out there and destroy other things and make them outposts as well, right? We force that on them. Or maybe we do nothing, right? We just kind of just sit back and we just build our own little thing here in hostile territory, and we're like, no, stay away. That's all these different things, right? Or we go into the community trying to make transformation. Do you transform by the sword? Do you transform by word? Do you transform by deeds? Those are all questions of wisdom that every church is probably trying to answer that question. How are we going to do it? We're going to transform in our church in Rame Elementary School, a Title I poverty-stricken school. That's going to be our way to be an outpost in a hostile territory, maybe. Or Fran, your church is covered all around it in tons and tons of unhoused, right? So maybe that's going to be your main emphasis of how to be an outpost community there. Okay, so that's all the stuff that we talked about before. Now we get into the Bible, which is something that I know a little bit about, but not a whole lot, but more than this stuff at least. All right. And of course, if we're going to get into the Bible, we should be getting into Genesis first, because it's all about Genesis. So let's jump into Genesis. And I think this is like, out of everything we've done, this is like the theological heart, right? We're going to spend several minutes, probably the entire time here in Genesis. It just depends on you. I have enough application questions in here to last 3 different, hours of doing this. So I don't know whether we're even going to get through the exegesis of it, but we're going to at least talk about all this stuff. So this is, when we talk about Genesis, here's the main question that we're asking, right? What is the Maho Dei? You guys have probably heard that phrase before, because you like your Latin, right? This is the foundational political anthropology from which everything else is going to flow. Okay? This is Amahu Dei scholarship. And so we're going to talk about the ancient Near East. We're going to talk about Hebrew. We're going to talk about 1,000 things that I hope make you go, I did not realize that was in Genesis. Like, that's kind of a new thing. So here's our question then. We're going to ask about the Mahudehi. This is the question I have. What are human beings for? What are humans for? And what does it mean to rule? Okay, yes, I'm kind of more or less answering this when I ask that question. So let's look at two verses, or actually two little pieces of verses, chapter 1 and chapter 2 in Genesis. I'll let you guys read them. Genesis 1, 26 through 28, and then 2:15. 1:26 through 28 is what we call the creation or the cultural mandate. Okay, so the command about creation or the command about culture, how we're supposed to relate to creation and culture. All right, so if somebody's got that first section, let's read 26 through 28.
I've got it.
All right, Carly, you're on it.
Then God said, "Let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground." So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and all the animals that scurry along the ground."
Okay, very nice. I liked it. Okay, now somebody also read chapter 2, verse 15. Just kind of turn the page there. Maybe it might be on the same page for all I know.
Chapter 2, verse 15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it.
Okay, till it and keep it. All right, that's cool words. All right, so let's start with that second verse and then go back to the first passage, second passage. I want you to just get some understandings of what these words mean. And I'm okay if we dwell on this a little bit. First of all, because I'm a Hebrew nerd and I like that kind of stuff. But it's super important to understand this kind of stuff. Okay, so the first word is avad. Okay, so A-B-A-D, something like that, or A-V, perhaps. Okay, that softer, hard B sound, avad. Okay, and that means to work. You said, I believe, to till. Right? So to work.
To work it.
Okay, so that's what's going on here. Maybe even to serve.
Mm-hmm.
Probably actually even better. And sometimes avad will show up as worship. So you're serving God by giving him worship. You serve God. So all of those words could fit into the semantic range of this. We're going to have to determine what it's probably going for in this. But here's what you really need to know here. This word, along with the next word, which is the word shamar. Okay, shamar, which means to guard or protect. So to serve and protect, it's on everybody's police cars, right? Avad and shamar, to serve and protect. That's what's going on here. To guard and to work. To serve and protect. These two words are going to point to something later on that the Levites are in charge of doing. Guarding and serving where? In the temple. So this is hugely significant. Okay, because sometimes we read Genesis as if it's a creation story of mankind for the first time, and he's new and shiny and brand new and perfect and all that stuff. And we miss that this same kind of language is showing up. Deuteronomy, all the way into all the temple language later on, they're going to be talking about these things that the Levites guard and serve in the temple. Mm-hmm. So their job is to keep out false prophets. Their job is to make worship doable. Right? Those are the things that they're in charge of. They're to create some kind of an in-between between the big king and the little king. That is, in this case, between God and maybe David, or God and mankind. Which we're going to get to in just a second, how David and mankind are kind of the same thing. Okay, but there's this big picture up here, God, and then there's man, and in between are the Levites, who are going to allow for the guarding and serving. They're going to make it so that we can go into the temple and worship God, or they're mediators, they're ambassadors.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is what the Levites do in the temple. So the human calling here is service, not extraction, not taking, right? Serving. So the reason I'm harping on this so long is because I think this is going to be hugely important when we start thinking about politics. Who are the kinds of people that we want to mediate this kind of agreement, this kind of movement, that stand in between God and man? Now, we can, as non-Christians, we just say it doesn't really matter. But as Christians, we at least want to say, who's going to represent this authority best for us? Maybe we want to ask that question. That'll be part of the application. Maybe you want to say, I don't care about that at all. I don't want somebody to have any kind of Christian notions whatsoever. I'd rather have, okay, fine. Okay, but at least in Genesis, this is the call. This is the political call, right? That somebody is going to stand in between and represent God. So that's the serving. The guarding, the shamar, is to watch over, to protect. And these are the kinds of people, like especially in the prophets, these are the watchmen. Okay, they're going to be guarding these things. They're going to stand on the city walls, and this is the human vocation, right? To protect, not to dominate, to protect, to care for. All right, so those two really important in Genesis 2:15. So God took the man and put him. All these words are important, by the way. Lakah, take, and put in the garden. Some of you think that he was made in the garden. It doesn't say that. He was put in the garden, but we'll deal with that when we get to Genesis one day. That's not important to my particular context here. But he's put in the Garden of Eden. By the way, Eden and the garden are different things, right? It's the garden that is in Eden. It's the garden that's made of Eden. Also not relevant to us in this case, but important. In order to work and to care for it, or to till the ground and to, what did you say, Riston? To till and serve? I think it was to till and to serve. All right, so mine says to work it and take care of it. Okay, so that it's this language of doing something, maybe with the ground. Maybe he's in charge of the garden. Maybe that's why it's mentioned right there. Put him in the Garden of Eden to work the garden and to care for it. So the garden is something specific. He's doing the shoveling. He's doing all that stuff. That's his call in the world.
One time before, James used the word stewardship. And I like that word here. I mean, maybe it's not the real word to use there, but I like it. Stewardship, taking care of something that's somebody else's, actually.
Yeah, excellent. So you just gave me that's the perfect segue into where I'm going here, right? And that is, this next word is radah. So radah is radah, R-A-D-A-H, R-D-H, radah, and that just means to rule. And so now we have got this question that Fran has brought up. What does it mean to rule something? Because that's where politics starts getting in there, right? Somebody's in charge, somebody's organizing, somebody's doing something in this whole thing. So this is language, it's royal language, it's used to kings. Kings are the ones who rule. But it says that humans, how's that word this? Let's make mankind our own image and our likeness so that they may rule over the fish of the sea. This is verse 26. And then verse 28, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So that's that radah sound, okay? So, radah word there. So what does it mean when it says rule them? Is that what yours all said? Rule over the fish? Maybe some of you say
dominion over.
Dominion, okay, have dominion. Mm-hmm. So that's a king word, right? And maybe some of you say subdue. Something like that. I see some Some heads nodding there.
Farm.
Farm. Okay. Ooh, that word is there. It uses the word farm.
As opposed to mine. Farming is growing stuff. And
Right.
mining is extracting it.
Okay.
Oof.
But is that word actually used in your text, or are you just coming up with that on your own?
It's an analogy that
I like it. Okay, that's great.
ties to other scripture.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Yeah. But what Fran said is the word steward,
Mhm.
right? And that makes some assumptions, right? Do all kings steward, or do
No.
they rule?
Muted.
I think it's a neutral term, isn't it? It could be rule benevolently or rule with an iron
Domineering.
fist.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's where Imago Dei comes in.
Yes.
We
Right.
are
So
ruling, we are God's representatives on earth. So we should treat it the way God would treat it, I guess. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah. Good.
I think you're going right, and that's the very beginning, right? Let us make mankind in our image. That's the Mahu Dehi, in the image of God. And then it says later on, so God created mankind in his own image. That's verse 27. In the image of God, he created them. So if he's created them in his image and he's given them a call, a vocation, then they rule, in some sense, as vice regents, right? As representatives of him. They're supposed to represent him well. So the question is, how does God rule? What is his purpose in ruling? And right now, Genesis, it seems like he's placing him there in order to fill the earth, right? Subdue it, go into the world, do all these things. But
Well, and he's called all of his creation good. So, I mean,
Yep.
he doesn't want it destroyed, right? If he's called
Yeah.
it good.
Yep.
He's out for his own delight.
Yeah, good.
Like it.
Mm.
All right. I don't know what
Go
ahead, Brad.
I was going for the John Piper answer.
Yeah, but not a bad one though. I like it.
Right. Yeah.
For his own delight and for ours, I think.
First catechism question.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, what is the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy him forever.
Forever.
If we're going Piper, we would say by enjoying him forever. Right. All right, so we have this Radah language, and then let me just add in this last word. It's just kabash. Let's see here, kabash. And that's more distinctly subdue. Right, subdue. So God created mankind in his own image, created the male and female. Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Subduing sounds very harsh. Is that the immediate connotation you might come up with? To subdue might be. Can you think of how would you use that word? Subdue.
Tame.
What was that?
Tame.
Tame. Okay, to tame something. Yeah.
To me,
And
the sub prefix of that word is putting down, is putting down either physically or otherwise. That's what I think of.
dang it. I only got maybe half of those words. Is he off for everybody else or just me?
It sounded like he was saying subdue the wife. He's thinking of wives or something like that. That's what, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Josh. No, I mean subdue as in like the sub prefix makes me think of underneath. So putting people down or putting things down, putting like weeds down or people, anything. That's what I think of. That's all I was saying.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't even know what the English word, what that would, but that's a good connotation. I like that.
Put the kibosh on something.
Put in a kibosh, K-I-B-O-S, yes, the kibosh. Nice.
Put the kibosh on it.
The first thing that came to mind was making the children go to bed? Like, is it the idea of like making things do what they're supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
So
okay,
the
good.
tree should grow and produce the,
Yeah.
I don't know that there's any actual connotation there, but
Well, remember what's happening, right, in the first 25 verses of this text. Okay, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was
formless and void.
tohu vabohu, formless and void, chaos, mess, disaster, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not disaster, but not organized. And
Not
so
organized,
subduing it is subduing or taming. Whoever said taming, I think Tom said that, right? Taming an otherwise wild and untamable.
I have a quick funny story, just 2 seconds. Gavin, I took him to Malibu when you were here, and we went. These waves were crazy, and we were in the water, and he was screaming "Tohu Bobo!" It was so crazy. It was insane, but yeah.
Only Hebrew nerds cry out Tohu Bobo.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
But the whole idea is bringing this ordered or this untamed creation under, in some way of taming it, right? Bringing it back into control. It's cultivating something that's wild.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people say that would be the best words for it. It's like a wilderness. It's a wild place, and he's bringing it under control. It really doesn't mean to exploit something fertile. Right? We're not dealing with a perfect place. We're dealing with a place that's wild that he's organizing. He's not grabbing hold of abundance and dominating it. Right? He is bringing order to these things. Does that make sense?
Francis Bacon, in the Enlightenment, he used this literally and said, if we're called to subdue the earth, this is like the genesis of the scientific method. So he said this is like Aristotle would be arguably the godfather of science, but this is like when science became methodological. So this verse, he uses this verse particularly with isn't that crazy? Isn't that, I thought it was interesting also, because in a sense he was right, and look at what's come about since. Yeah. Manipulate maybe is a synonym, or like I don't know if that's a good synonym. Probably not.
No, because manipulate has the connotation of something that might be negative, I think, usually.
Yeah.
And this is all about something, organizing. It's a beautiful thing.
And
so remember, nothingness in the Bible and in Genesis, nothingness it doesn't have reality because it is not in order. It's still chaotic. It's not actually nothing exists. That's not what nothing is. It hasn't been given its role yet. Hasn't been given its purpose. It hasn't been moved.
Yeah. Jace.
Yeah.
Jace.
Robert, nice to see you.
Yeah. Nice to see you too. And it's not just tilling and gardening that we're talking about here. It's every living thing.
Right.
Everything that crawls and moves. So, gardening is one thing, but dealing with all the beasts and bugs is kind of universal.
Yep. Yeah. So, all the things that have been created in the first 25 verses or that have organized are now under control or stewardship of mankind. The way God cares for these things in organizing them, now he said, all right, now you keep going. Here you go. Do these things. And that includes the garden, because that's verse 15, right? Gardening and tilling and taking that. But also verses 26, 27, 28. Fish, birds, whatever there is out there, he's supposed to take control. But when you hear take control or subdue, you hear something negative. It's not meant that way, right? It's meant to bring order to something. And in their world, order is always better. Order is what gives things purpose. So this is really important to the political question. Who do we want to be representing us? Or who represents creator or creation, and whatever you want it to do? who is in this position that can subdue / steward / order things and make things beautiful. Okay, so and that's the important thing, right? And I put this picture on the Facebook today. The crown is not it's not grabbed, right? It's given. So it's not seized, it's handed over. That's going on here. The crown is given to Adam, and that makes it delegated authority. Very important. Every authority that exists is delegated by God, at least in Christian worldview. This is they must represent whatever that is above them. And that has to do with that image bearing. So we got to jump into the image bearing. They're not self-appointed image bearer, not self-appointed lords or kings. They are appointed by God himself. And so the moment anyone forgets their authority is delegated, I think is the moment that politics starts taking on a bad turn, that it becomes bad. Right? That's when political evil begins.
So what you're saying, if it's taken, not given, it takes on,
Yep.
Or yeah. Yep.
All authority should be delegated from God. Okay. Again, this is the Bible's perspective, where you're welcome to disagree with it, right? Or you're welcome to say, yes, that's the way they understood it, but we shouldn't anymore. I'm just trying to give you that background. And for those of us who take the Bible very seriously, we need to ask those follow-up questions. What does that mean for us today? Because it doesn't automatically mean we think the same way the people in Genesis think. That's not, I mean, I've spent the last several years trying to make sure that we think that through. New Testament doesn't think the way Genesis people think. So that doesn't mean we have to. But we do have to understand it so that we can then take the moves that we want to make from those things. All right, so let's jump into the ancient Near East even more right now with that image bearer idea. So I'm not going to write this in Hebrew for you. I'm just going to tell you what it says. It says, Tselem Elohim. Right? So this is that word, image of God. And there's this whole Amahu Dehi for centuries. People have been trying to understand what that means. And a lot of people just think of it as just some generic spiritual concept, but it's not. It fits very obviously into Genesis, this royal language. It has a very specific function. Okay, so I've got some quotes here that I want to read. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this, just to walk you through the image of God, or to read these quotes and then like comment on them. So I'm just going to start with reading one quote, and that'll get me started, and then I'll probably just wax less than eloquently for a few minutes. So it says this. This is Walter Brueggemann. If you're reading Walter Brueggemann, you're doing well. Like, this is something that's worthwhile to read always. He says this: it is now widely recognized that the concept of the image of God in Genesis reflects the ancient Near Eastern practice of a king setting up images, which is Tselem, of himself throughout his realm as a sign of his sovereign rule. In this light, the creation of human beings as God's image implies that they are placed in the world as God's representatives, exercising dominion on his behalf. Okay, so here's what's going on in Genesis. And some of you have heard this 100 times, and I apologize. Just bear with me for 2 minutes or something like that, right? God breathes into man, right, into clay, and he makes it living. Everything he does in this story of Genesis 1 is so that this man can exist. So basically, he is creating a space, a sacred place, for his image to reign. This is really important. This is all temple theology. This is anthropology. This is how we get our feelings of who humans are and why they're relevant, why they're important in the world, what purpose they have. All of that comes from this very beginning part. So God begins working, right? He says, let there be light. Okay, now we've got light in the darkness. Okay, and then on day 4, he creates those things, right? Sun and the moon, or the greater light and the lesser light. So we call them the sun and the moon. And they correspond, day 1 and day 4. Day 2 and day 5 correspond, right? He separates the waters from the waters like this. Then he makes a firmament, a rakia in the upper. If we could do Genesis, I'll go into a lot more detail, but a lot of you have heard this before, right? So he separates it again, because what's happening in a chaotic world, okay, pedagogical faux pas here. Let's see here. What's happening in a chaotic world? That's purple. I thought I had blue. Oh, here's blue. Dang it. Sorry, you got to bear with me. Pedagogy is everything. Okay, here we go. All right. So we have this huge mess here. Right. And so what he does is he starts separating. Okay. He builds a rakia there, and then he cuts off a bunch of the spots here. So now we have enough space for mankind to be able to breathe, because all we have is darkness, choshek, right, and water, mayim. So we have this mess that you can't do. Speaking of Josh and Davin's trip to Tohu Vabohu in the water, you can't breathe when you're under the water, so he separates it, and you can't see under the water, so he gives light. Okay, that's what he's doing. And then, of course, you still can't stand because mankind falls down into, right? He's going to fall down into the water, and you're not going to be able to breathe there either. So instead, he makes a spot. He separates the waters from the waters this way, and dry ground appeared. Okay, so we've got water, and now his image can be set up. What he's done is he's created a sacred space for mankind to rule as his representative. Okay, sacred space. And what's sacred space in the Bible? There's a few places, right, that connect. Okay, so in the very beginning we have heaven and earth. We'll just do it like this, realms, right? And they're both there. Heaven and earth. That's the whole idea. He's created a place where mankind can dwell. So mankind is going to be here. Over time, what's going to happen is those things are going to separate, right? The one realm from the other realm. So the realm that humans are in and the realm that God is in becomes separated. And this is why we pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Right? We're trying to make these things come together again. But in the meantime, only this place connects. And in this place, we have things like temple, tabernacle, right? These moments where God dwells with man, where the Ark of the Covenant says it's his footstool. So he spreads out his back, puts his head back on heaven, and his feet are out. My feet are out, I promise. Out on his footstool, connecting to earth, where the Ark of the Covenant is. And that's where that place meets. So this is his image. This is the same thing that kings will do. Kings will come in, emperors will come in, Caesars will ride in on their horses, they will conquer a place, and they will leave a representative in their kingdom for themselves. That is their image. As long as that image represents him well, all is well. When that image stops representing him well, he loses his head. Right? That's how they do that. And if there's places where the image is not, then what they do is they go into the temple and they will create a statue. A statue of the Caesar, of the emperor, which is why, right, when we get to Exodus, you're not allowed to make any image, right? That's very important. This is not just because he doesn't want you to worship idols. It's because the idol already exists. Right? Humanity is the idol. Humanity is the icon, is the image. Tselem.
So
I think of like Dagon. Isn't that the god that?
Dagon is one of the gods, right? Not of the Hebrew people, but yes.
Right. He's like
Philistine.
Philistine. Thank you. Yeah, I think of it like his head gets decapitated or something, right?
Right.
Falls down in front of the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah.
That's an amazing picture of like.
Yeah. It's a great story.
Power. Yeah.
But you can't have any kind of representative of God because he already made his representative of God.
Which is
that's who you are.
Correct?
What?
Or no, you're talking about humans. It's
humans.
Yeah, that's right.
Humans. So you are that. You are that royal representative. So anybody, I mean, this should speak to our shame. This speaks to our purpose in life, our vocation. Like just in this first chapter, first couple chapters, we're going to get all of that in there. Like, how can you have shame? The king of the universe made you and called you royal representative, right? That's your job. This is hugely important because Genesis could be, at least in its Genesis, in the beginning of Genesis, when Genesis existed, probably before it looks the way it looks right now, it was probably told, these stories were probably told during the period of the Exodus. And so the Exodus, everybody would have worshipped the Pharaoh who would have been over them. That would have been somebody who was a son of God, right?
Mhm.
And so someone's writing this, maybe Moses is writing this, or at least telling these stories. If you hold the historicity and all this stuff, he's telling these stories, and he'll say something like, hey, Pharaoh's not the only one made in the image of God, you lunkheads. You are all made in the image of God. Stop worshiping, stop giving that place of primacy to this Pharaoh. He doesn't deserve it. You're all images of God. Only worship the creator, not the created beings. And this is the problem that Paul's going to talk about later on, right? It's going to be like we gave it over in Romans chapter 1. We gave over to the darkness, to the other beings out there. We made idols and we worshiped them. We put them in the place of primacy, and that's been the whole problem all along. We can't put something else in place of primacy because the image of God is found in all of us, which should answer all kinds of political questions for us. Anytime somebody decides to treat somebody with less than the dignity of the image of God, these are not people that we cheer for. Right? Now, we all do that a little bit, right? And sometimes we don't know it, sometimes we do, right? But we all probably have blinders on and we're accidentally doing it. Somebody who's way beneath us, we might treat, we might treat them a little bit more shortly, a little more curtly. We don't even really mean to do it, but we know they can't offer us anything, and we know no one cares, so we just don't treat them with quite as much respect. You get the idea, right? So we're going to ask lots of questions about that, but I'm starting to get to I'm getting all the way in there. So these are the people who are made to rule and represent. All right. Does this, I did that in 5 minutes. So does this big picture kind of make sense? Do you have questions about this? Because this is really important to get if you're going to understand how the Bible's working. So when I do like Old Testament survey, when I teach Old Testament or biblical survey, I spend half of the class in Genesis 1 through 3. That might be a little hyperbolic, maybe Genesis 1 through 11. Because everything is bouncing off of these big picture ideas. So if you stop and you think, or if you automatically think Genesis is a story about how men were created, you're missing the symbolism that's going on here, right? That's not what's going on. Okay, this is the beginning of the world, but it's not. It's a myth making. So I have to say so much in here. It's myth making, right? It is grabbing hold of a story, saying, "Okay, here's the creation of the world," but not to give you a creation of the world story, to give you what's important about why the world exists. Right? What is going on? Not just what the world exists, why Israel exists. Israel is a representative for the whole world.
Why here's what I want to ask. Why humans exist. So if we're all made in the image of God, created in the image of God, what's the definitive difference between post-exile Israel and then post Jesus, the new Israel? But what if someone's saying, why do I need Jesus if we're all made in the image of God? Like, what would, why would we need anything to change that? And so do you understand what the question I'm asking?
I do, and the answer is really simple.
Okay, good. Right,
the
fall, right? Because it's a distorted image, and we need a redirection, I guess, is what I know the answer, but I was wondering how to actually ask the question, and then how to answer the question to like an atheist or an agnostic, saying, "Hey, if we're all made in the image of God, why do I need to anything different? I'm just fine just the way I am." That kind of. I'm playing devil's advocate here, but
because thinking you're fine just the way you are is the story of Genesis 3.
Right.
Thinking that you know better,
right?
Yeah, because you don't, because you're choosing your knowledge over God's knowledge.
Yeah.
What a great answer. Yeah, that's good.
Yep. Like in the end of Judges, it says, "And everyone did what was right."
Yeah.
In their own eyes.
In their own eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let me read. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Josh.
No, I just think of all the other classes we've done prior about ethics and like, well, what is God's will for our lives, or what is the direction, and how could that be more clear? And those are ethical conundrums, I think, that we've just got out of, we just talked about for quite some time. So I don't want to go back, but it's just, that's the other camp I land in a lot of times is now, okay, I understand it's Christocentric. My view needs, it's redirected, but what does that look like? And in particular circumstances, it looks different, like you said, wisdom. But anyways.
Yep. And that's good. Yeah. That's why we do that kind of conversation in community. Once we have at least their stabilizing spot, right? Okay. Now that we know this, that we're supposed to be representatives of God, what does it mean to represent God in this community versus a community 30 years ago or 100 years ago or 500 or 2,000 or 3,000, right? And it's going to look different for each one of those things. And so that's why we need to work those things through together and agree on some things and disagree on other things. But find that community together. All right, let me read a couple of these things, because in case this seemed really fast, these quotes might help solidify that, or might allow me to go off on some other tangent that I haven't thought of yet. So let me read this next one. So you heard Walter Brueggemann already. This is John Walton. John Walton has written a whole bunch of books called the Lost World series. It's not about dinosaurs. Well, one of them is kind of about dinosaurs, I guess. It's not meant to be, but it's about creation. It's these Genesis stories and Torah stories and scripture stories. And he's answering a whole bunch of exegetical questions. And he says this: in the ancient world, only the king bore the divine image. Genesis democratizes this. I just basically said that, right? Only the pharaoh, only the large one. And Genesis says, no, everybody, right? Democratizes it. Everyone bears it. This is a stunning political claim. Every human being, from slave to emperor, carries the status of royal representative. Any politics that degrades human beings is already contradicting the Bible's first page. Okay, so you can imagine what my application questions are going to be at the end of this, which will likely be next week, right? What things have you heard politicians say that destroy the image of God in people, that degrade people? Because that means they're not acting as good representatives. They probably say, we don't care. Maybe, who knows what they'll say.
I heard one say, quiet, piggy, quiet.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
I heard one say shithole countries.
Yeah. Right. And I hope, like, I know those sound partisan because we're talking about the same person for both of those things, and you can come up with a dozen more, but they do exist on both sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
And you could still say, okay, you got two quotes of this person who said this, which means I'd lack total respect for what they said, but also say I still want to vote for that person because of something else. Right? But at least you're going to have to say he's not. In those quotes, we're going to go a lot further in this, but just to start us off with, in those quotes, that's not this, right? That is incredibly anti-Christian, right? Not just unchristian, but anti-Christian. All right, here's N.T. Wright. This is from the day the revolution began. The image of God is not merely a spiritual quality, but a royal priestly function. Humans are placed in the world as God's vice regents, stewards charged with extending God's garden temple throughout creation. Here, everything I said is right in there, right? This vocation is inherently political. It concerns how we order the world together, which is how I define politics, right? How we order the world, how we do community together. Obviously, I read the quotes, then I wrote the script. So it's not the other way. Like, whoa, they just happen to be copying. No, I'm stealing from them. And all the stuff before. This is Al Walters, Creation Regained. It says this: the cultural mandate of Genesis 1, cultural mandate, creation mandate, verses 26 through 28, to be fruitful, fill the earth, and have dominion, is not permission for exploitation, but a commission for cultivation. Human beings are called to develop the latent potential of creation for the flourishing of all. When we build cities, write laws, create institutions, and govern communities, we are fulfilling the Genesis vocation or distorting it. So one way or the other, we're doing political things, right? We're either ruining a community or creating one, all around this vocation idea. This is the Amahu Deity. How do you represent? So you say, what is the image of God? Does he have muscles? Does he have a beard? What is his image? Are we images? No. It means we represent him well. Okay. Mm-hmm. Probably even things like, the fourth commandment, right? Don't take the name of the Lord in vain, has that at its base. That is not saying, hey, here's what God looks like. Here's who God is, but representing him well. It probably has less to do with saying GD and way more to do with saying, here's what Jesus would support, or here's what God would support, the things that I'm doing. And therefore, people look at us, look at the church, look at God-fearers and say, I don't want anything to do with that God. That's that fourth command, probably. All right, here's Richard Middleton. I'm quoting from The Liberating Image, but you've got to read his book, Heaven and Earth, at some point. Fantastic. It says, the cultural mandate is not a license to do whatever we want with creation. It's a calling to develop and cultivate the earth in a way that reflects God's own character, generative, life-giving, ordering chaos towards shalom, towards wholeness or peace or well-being. Okay, that's that word shalom. It doesn't just mean peace. It's much bigger.
What's the author's name?
This is Richard Middleton.
Okay.
And the book you should read before this one is it Heaven and Earth? Is that the title of it?
That's what I put down, but this is something else.
Somebody will Google it while I'm sitting here. But it's about heaven and earth. And it's really good. Like, if you're going to read Surprised by Hope at N.T. Wright, which should be, if people haven't read that before, that needs to be your first book on your list for the last 20 years. But then Richard Middleton is very similar. By the way, N.T. Wright just came out with a new one, which I'm about a fourth of the way through, called God Homecoming, which is the follow-up to Surprised by Hope. And it is awesome already. I'm like, so good. All right. But this isn't Jace quoting people all day. All right, so that's Genesis 1. Anything else we want to say about Genesis 1? Because we've got to get to the problem. Genesis 3.
So based on what you were just saying, I was wondering when you were planning on taking the mining industry on with their use of cyanide in the soil to filter out gold.
Yeah. I'm not going to take them on, but I'm assuming you will for me, which would be great.
Well, my father-in-law used to be in it, so maybe that'll be an end somehow.
I mean, this is it's. I mean, I know you're smiling, but it's that question and every other question of how we treat the earth, how we treat people, how we treat environment. All those are part of the creation mandate.
Oh yeah,
and it's not easy all the time to know. Like, okay, well, I need oil. Do I do this? This might affect this. Like, I don't know the answers to all of those things. Again, those are those ethical questions that come from a stable place that we've got here. And then
well, and in that case, it's not just about oil; it's about gold. That's the type of mining that he was a part of. It's gold and silver and opal out west in the open pit mines, and using cyanide to filter through the soil to get those elements down to their pure refined state. So that in turn then takes on the whole economy around gold as well, and even questioning the gold standard too. So. But yeah, I say that jokingly, but I also say that with some seriousness, having been exposed to that culture there.
Yeah.
Just going back to the GD moment you said there, I did a funeral a couple weeks ago, and the son of the father, his father was 84. He said his wife would always say, "God damn it, Louise." And he wanted me to say that in the funeral. and I said no. And then he's like, "Come on, dude, you're not gonna burn." And then I got permission, and anyways, I said it. And but anyways.
Wait, what do you mean you got permission? You talked to me about that. I didn't give you permission.
Not to do it. I know. And then he was like, "Dude, you gotta say it." He's like, I was like, "I'll just point to you, you say it." He's like, no. He's like, "You gotta do it." And I thought, they're gonna crucify me. And then the mortuary, which are my friends too, they're like, I think you should do it, dude. And then so anyways, not my proudest moment as a minister,
Now
but
Josh is going to
confessing
hell.
my sin here. All right. So please absolve me.
We'll absolve you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to think
David.
about it for a little while. Yeah. Lori already did it, so I guess I have to now.
Man, if
Yeah.
you need absolution for that, I need absolution for the way I cuss with some of my patients. So
No, I'm being I'm kidding too. You know that, Randall. But yeah, but it's good. This is good.
You were talking about Middleton's book,
Yeah.
A New Heaven and a New Earth.
There it is. Yeah. Thank you. I knew somebody would look it up for me. I didn't have to. Thank you, David. All right. Speaking of sins like saying bad words, Randall and Josh, children. And Lori said a bad word earlier, too. I can't believe you guys.
Hey, we're quoting people, okay?
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
Thanks, Lori.
Hopefully, if you're new here, you know we don't care about stuff like that. All right. So Genesis 3, speaking of sins that we're all doing. But I think this is what the problem is. Sometimes we think of Genesis 3 as, okay, here's where the first sin starts. And I guess, but that's not what's really going on here, right? It's trying to describe, or that's not only what's going on here. It's trying to describe like political distortion. The problem is the desire, and somebody said this in here, the desire to be like God on God's term, on one's own terms. Right? Like I want to be like God. I'm going to choose on my own. I'm going to pick this fruit, even though I was told not to. I'm going to, the proverbial young man in Proverbs, like literally the proverbial young man, right? Which path will you go? Will you go towards Lady Folly or Lady Wisdom? That's the Adam story. Those are the same story, just retold in different poetic structures, right? Who will you choose? Will you choose the path of life, abundance, goodness, God, or the path of exile, foolishness, darkness, death, right? Those are the two options that you have. So it's a matter of how will you take those steps? Will you choose to take the steps based on your own thinking, your own wisdom, or on God's thinking? And the whole problem here is that we grasp, we take, right, instead of receive. And so Adam was supposed to represent God, receive authority, get vice regent, and he decided he was going to be the regent. He was going to make decisions on his own. Okay, so he starts to define good and evil for himself, and to claim that prerogative is that's the divine prerogative. Divinity gets to do that. God gets to do that, and he's saying, no, I'm going to be ultimate instead. So he's not ruling as a steward anymore. He's ruling as an autonomous lord. Adam says,
Does that harken back to the part where you said that God took man and put him in the garden? Like, if God as deity can take and put, but we're not supposed to take and put.
Yeah, I have to think about that. Maybe there's a connection there. Yeah, I mean, for sure, that's what's happening because mankind, is man and God is God, and he's put. The word "put" it's almost like he's being planted in the garden himself.
Right, but man is taken from somebody outside all of it.
Yeah,
and then man takes from inside of it. Like he doesn't have the perspective.
Nice.
From which to take.
Yeah. And so what happens there is he starts exploiting what should be cultivated, right? So he starts taking and doing with it what he wants, but he's supposed to be managing it, stewarding it, caring for it, shamar and avad, right? Protecting and serving for something bigger. Which, by the way, the bigger is for everybody else. There's lots of other people in the world in Genesis It's really important to know about Genesis. It's not just about two people. The whole world exists. They've just been pulled out and planted in a place in order to represent God well to the rest of humanity and everything else.
You need to take that nonsense back to BioLogos, Jason.
I think BioLogos would be pretty happy with what I just said. They'd be fans of that. All right, so I've talked with Deborah. I've talked with Who else is in BioLogos? Walton is. A whole bunch of friends of mine are there.
Waltke was at one time.
Was he? Yeah, Waltke maybe so. Yeah, well,
I think he and NT Wright led the charge on it, didn't they?
I don't know. I know NT Wright probably had a lot to do with that because he's good friends with Francis Collins, who started that whole thing. I didn't remember that Waltke did that. Waltke got me out of some political trouble himself, actually, when I got in trouble at a church for saying almost what I just said about Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
He came to my rescue in that one, but it was a wonderful thing. So he supported me. So
have you heard NT Wright and Francis sing that song about BioLogos?
Yeah, I've heard them sing it before. Yeah. All right. Sorry for those of you who are not quite as big a Bible nerds as Randall and I are, and all this little inside stuff going on here. But follow up with that stuff. All right. This is the root. This is the root of political evil, right? Power that forgets that it's delegating power. That's the problem. It's authority that claims ultimacy. I'm the king now. It's a rule that exploits rather than cultivates. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. So every authoritarian regime, every corrupt institution, every political leader who places themselves above accountability, all of this is a distortion of the first couple pages of Genesis, of the whole vocation that we've been called to. So here's Reinhold Niebuhr. The sin of Adam is not simply disobedience, it is arrogation of divine prerogative. The belief that one can be one's own ultimate authority. Mm-hmm. Politics infected by by this same sin, produces systems that pretend to ultimacy. Christians should be the first to name that idolatry. So it's when we take arrogation, when we take something that's not rightfully ours, when we take something that's a divine prerogative, the belief that this is us, we're the ultimate authority. And that's the problem of politics. Right? So this is where maybe we could start applying instead of getting too far into the application. You have examples of different people other than just our current president, although if you've got things from our president, but governors or things that you've heard where people are feeling like they don't have any accountability, or who treat a political opponent as enemies that need to be destroyed rather than image bearers that need to be engaged and lifted up and supported. And I don't want it to be partisan, but maybe it'll end up being that way because in our current setting, right, we know things from this year, and that's our main thing. But
California,
my point is to reach a pattern, not to reach apart, not to go against the party. Tom, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
California, Minnesota.
California, Minnesota. Well, I mean, give me some examples of
the whole fraud stuff going on in Minnesota, stealing federal money.
Okay, so all right, we'll connect that to what we were talking
taken
about.
Care of.
What was that?
It was taken care of. It was investigated. It was taken care of.
Okay, so yeah, okay, so that's good. If you're gonna, whatever examples you're gonna give me, I want to hear, like, how does it connect to those particular ideas, right? Accountability, which I guess is where you were going with that, Tom.
Yeah.
Enemies as need to be destroyed, or any kind of like image bearers being pushed down. Do you hear that in politics?
Nazi Germany, North Korea, now current.
Okay, do you have any like specific examples? Give us more.
That's all I got.
I mean, Nazi Germany is probably. I mean, that was a kind of an obvious one, right? The Jews are evil, or the homosexuals are evil, or black people are, like whatever, like pushing down a whole race or a whole group of people. Yeah,
Davin had one.
Yeah, and the exact same thing. What politicians have been demonizing black people for, a very specific example is Ronald Reagan and his welfare queens argument that he continued to make for a long time about like these black women that would have a bunch of fake names and take a bunch of welfare from the government and live lavish lives. But that never actually happened, and it was just a way for the media to demonize black women and black people specifically. There's a very specific example.
Nice. Okay, good.
I read a book in college. I'm not going to remember the name of it exactly now, but people who didn't really think the Confederacy had died. And so it was how, and like regular people, right, who like refused to celebrate Martin Luther King Day and had all of their jargon around it was that a certain certain race of people were less than, were more animalistic, were more simple-minded. Like, my family's from the South, and I remember sitting in a family reunion while my uncle stood around talking about how slavery wasn't all that bad for everyone. I'm like, okay, ownership of a person, like me, I'm sure there were some that were treated decently, but like all the same, ownership is not, that's not stewarding and protecting and image bearing to own another person, And so even, I know that shaped a lot of politics, but even the people living under those politicians had absorbed that and were continuing to speak that out.
Yeah.
And this would have been the late 90s.
You heard Daniel Tosh. I'm sure none of you good Christians would ever listen to Daniel Tosh. where he talks about, where they're signing the Declaration of Independence. All people are created equal. You know what we mean. Yeah, like
3/5.
Yeah, not everybody.
Like, how does the 3/5 law ever get passed? That African Americans counted as 3/5 of a person for population to send your delegates.
What about the Japanese?
That was also back when it was just men and it wasn't women.
Yeah, there you go too. Yep. Fran, you spoke louder than you want. What'd you say, Fran?
Japanese who were taken from their homes and put out in the desert in some kind of, kind of
Japanese internment camps.
Internment, that's the word. Yeah.
During the Second World War.
The detention camps that are going on right now.
You can see that's not very different from an ICE detention center.
Yeah.
It is different, but not very different.
It allows for a greater ethnic pool to draw from. So it's more okay. She says tongue in cheek.
We're okay.
Yeah. Jace, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. We're in the last 4 minutes. Ask away.
Do we do this as parents? When we decide, so I'm thinking like James Dobson rhetoric that children are, there's a lot of like your child is born sinful. Okay, true, but like because of that, now we see them as this problem to be solved, and it's your job as a parent to exert absolute authority that they will comply with all the time. Otherwise, there's some sort of physical consequence that ensures that they never cross that authority again. And that was delivered as, when I started doing some research, James Dobson's elevated by the Republican Party way back when, and a lot of his views change from what, like, he worked under somebody who had been a Nazi scientist, and like it shifts when the Republican. If you go looking, it's crazy. When Reagan gets into power, they need a bigger voting base, and so they choose the Christian right, elevate him, and now we need strong families with strong patriarchs to raise good Christian boys who won't be communist. And so James Dobson's parenting theory follows that trajectory. And say what you want about children today, like I'm not sure that the emotional crisis we've had in the last 25 years doesn't come from people exerting authority over other people without protecting and serving.
Man, good. All the stuff you said I knew, I just didn't know that beginning piece there. So if you read like DeMay on this, Jesus and John Wayne, he'll talk a lot about that stuff.
That's right.
But I didn't remember that first part. That's interesting though. Because I grew up in that culture like most of us did, right? That 70s James Dobson is anything he says rule goes.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to children, I really want to think that through wisely, because we are an authority over children.
Yes, right. Yes.
But that ending is how you said it, without protection and service.
Is it about me and my
really
comfort
good.
and being embarrassed as a parent?
Yeah.
Or is it about raising a child to be godly, to understand, to have a moral compass, to not fear a certain consequence, but to develop the right way of thinking, a wisdom about life? Which one are we promoting by the way we're executing our authority?
Yeah, I remember his quote, when it comes to you and an obstinate child, right? Between you and your son, win and win definitively.
Yes.
Like, and I've used that in many classes I've taught.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I kind of still think it, but it's just such a defiant, domineering way of looking at it. If you're not saying win for the purpose of protection and service, and so it's not winning. I mean, it's just the wording seems wrong.
Winning is a bad term, right? Yeah. It's like, this is the standard because God said so, and we are going to keep pushing that standard as long as you live in my house. Not because I'm winning, but because God said so.
Or because this is what abundance is like, and it's the best thing for you. And yeah, I don't know. Randall, what were you going to say? Sorry, we just kept going.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. I was just going to say this is a real point that Jews have tried to develop in their parenting discussions, even within Jewish medical doctors that Ashley and I encountered in Newton, Massachusetts. This is really something that Jews have gone to bat for children over. I mean, we had to deal with some overprotective doctors while we were in Newton. But then I found out later that it wasn't just that they were doctors. It was that they were Jewish, and that there is a strong body of Jewish literature on not domineering children and protecting them, as Carly was pointing out. And it went back to orphanages that the Jews had in Germany pre-World War II, and then some of those orphanage administrators and doctors went to the gas chamber with their children. Actually, insisted that they go with them. So it's a strong heritage in the Jewish movement.
All right, it's 9:17. We're going to open this up next week with some applications, some hot button issues. I just, like who gets counted as an image bearer? What does dehumanizing political language look like? Some of the things we just said. And let's ask about divinely appointed leaders before we get into the next section. Genesis is going to be key. I feel like this is probably the most important one for us to be able to grasp what the kings are doing later on, right? And then what other people under other kings are doing. Like, how do they follow a king who is not a good authority? What do they do? What do the people do in Persia, right? What do they do in Babylon? How do they interreact and interrelate? And of course, we're going to get to Revelation. What do they do in Rome and things like that? So what do we do when we have all these people that are over us that don't represent the way we hope that they would represent, the way that we naturally would like them to? All right, so let's stop our thing, and then you guys can keep talking, but I'll be a lot more quiet.